Joe Rogan hosted this debate where Douglas Murray just condescended and talked down to Dave Smith, which is ironic as hell because Douglas is a vapid know-nothing tribalist, as I'm going to systematically prove in this video. And Dave Smith is actually very well versed on foreign policy issues. Let's walk through it. It started with Douglas questioning Dave's motivations in speaking on Israel and Palestine.
Dave's a comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
No, I don't know if I'm mainly talking about Israel.
That's all I see you on the
opinions.
internet doing.
Yeah, but that's you.
Well, that might be what you've seen.
It's
but
just
I don't
you
think that's.
consuming
But
clips.
that is also your shtick now, isn't it?
No, dude, that's not called a shtick. It's called having the decency and humanity to speak out whenever you see your government funding crimes against humanity. You might recognize decency and humanity if you had some of that in you. Then it became an attack on Dave for just having the audacity to share his thoughts out loud when he's not an expert.
I'm still slightly bemused about this move from I'm an expert on this and I have views to I'm a comedian.
I've never claimed to be an expert on anything.
This is the problem, Joe.
The implication here is that Dave should just be quiet and defer to the experts. But look what happens when Dave does cite the experts on how Israel's blockade destroyed Gaza's economy.
The World Bank said in 1996 for the 1 year of the
libertarians
blockade.
are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that it was a 40%
your
of the
own analysis.
whole.
Oh, so now he doesn't want him to rely on the experts and wants him to do his own analysis. I mean, it's just incredible how he switched his position 180 degrees mid-argument like it's nothing. Now, because Douglas had positioned himself as the expert who's here to scold and talk down to Dave and Joe and explain to them how the world works, he made it impossible for himself to just admit that he doesn't know the answer to a question, which made things a little awkward.
The other people in the orbit
Churchill was
describing.
the author of this whole Operation Unthinkable, right? Where they wanted to use the Nazis to invade Russia. Wasn't that Churchill? Is that not true?
We're going to have to get into the weeds on Churchill.
Whenever Douglas would just objectively lose a point, he never conceded that he was wrong. He would just condescendingly insist on moving the conversation along to a different point. Watch him do it when Dave corners him on Israeli leaders admitting their motivations in allowing funding to reach Hamas.
They allowed funds to go from Qatar to Hamas because Hamas was governing the Gaza.
For the reason of preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state.
No, that was not the case.
That is what Netanyahu said. That is what Ehud Barak said. No. It's all
There's
up and down.
One claim. There's one recording of Netanyahu saying something along those lines. But look, I mean, we should get on. We should get onto it.
I could read you the quotes from Ehud Barak as well.
No, I know.
It's all of them have talked about it.
The situation. Let's get onto it.
He did it again when Dave pointed out that Israel leveled Gaza.
Decides to level the entire place and just slaughter women and children in large numbers.
It didn't decide to do that, and it didn't do that. But yeah,
it didn't level the place. Hasn't been destroyed.
Gaza is pretty leveled by now.
Yeah,
but it did not go in to level the place like that. No.
Okay, they went in and leveled the place, but that wasn't their intention.
Let's just go back to the beginning if we can.
Oh no, that wasn't their intent from the beginning. I guess those of us who have been saying from the beginning that this was Israel's plan must have been psychic or something. But the most pretentious and posturing bit of theater that Douglas did is give Dave a hard time for having the nerve to talk about how Israel devastated Gaza's economy, even though Dave has never been to the border crossings.
No, there was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are plenty.
No goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been? I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is.
Okay, so much stupidity here. First, if someone told you that you can't say that the World Trade Center was attacked on 9/11 unless you visited New York yourself, you would tell that person that their brain is broken. Second, how on earth is visiting the border crossing even remotely useful in telling you whether Israel is letting enough goods into Gaza or not? What, you yourself are going to climb into the back of every truck and take inventory and bring a calculator and start doing math on it? I mean, if you're not going to trust the experts on this, what you would need to do is go into Gaza and see how people are living and talk to them and see if they have access to enough goods. And Dave Smith can't go into Gaza because Israel does not allow international journalists to go into Gaza, despite the entire world pleading with them to let journalists in. And the Palestinian journalists who are inside Gaza, Israel is murdering them at a rate that is unknown in the entire history of human warfare. So how did Douglas get into Gaza, you ask? Well, he's a stooge for Netanyahu, so he was embedded with the Israeli military to go in and do propaganda coverage for them. That's why he received an award for defending their genocide. I mean, just think of the level of imbecility required to think that this is some sort of objective and eye-opening visit to the region.
Is there a blockade?
The blockade that existed, to the extent it existed, was a blockade to try to make sure that the Israelis and the Egyptians knew what materials were going in and out of Gaza. The reason why trucks get searched is not because the Israelis want to search through grain or flour. It's because they wanted to stop the trucks containing the arms and the munitions.
My guy, Israel was banning potato chips and sodas and jam and pasta and cookies. Do you know how far your head has to be up your own behind to think that these things are weapons? Yeah, as far as this guy's. The reason these food items were restricted is explained by Israeli policymakers who said they want to put Palestinians in Gaza on a diet to make them uncomfortable. It was even explained by Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Democrat in the US Congress, who said that we have to strangle Palestinians in Gaza economically until they cooperate. I mean, call me crazy, but if Israeli officials and American officials are both admitting that the goal of the blockade is to punish civilians, maybe it's time to stop lying through your teeth and pretending it's only about weapons.
Even by the standards of a conflict in neighboring Syria, the highest Hamas death count inside Gaza for the appalling last year and a half is less than an average year has been for the last decade in Syria.
That's definitely not true for the average year over the past decade, but let's set that aside for a second. Syria is hundreds of times bigger than Gaza. Its population is more than 10 times bigger than Gaza's. And the overwhelming majority of the casualties are combatants in that war, which makes sense because it's not just a civil war, it's also a proxy war where the US and Russia and Israel and Turkey and Iran and just about every other regional power had armed and funded fighters to go in and fight, or even participated directly in that war. That's what was unfolding in Syria. Gaza is a tiny concentration camp with a small captive population that Israel is destroying like fish in a barrel. The fact that you think these situations are comparable is really laughable. But you know what? Let's compare them. Do you know what year was the worst in terms of death toll in the Syrian civil/proxy war? It was 2014, when more than 100,000 people were killed in Syria, overwhelmingly combatants. Do you know how many Syrian children were killed that year? 368, according to the UN. Do you know how many Palestinian children were killed in Gaza that year by Israel? More than 550 Palestinian children. That should remind you that Israel has been massacring Palestinian children in Gaza since long before October 7th, the alleged starting point that you keep trying to go back to. And if you wanted to look at the rate at which Israel is killing children in Gaza right now, that is unprecedented since the Rwandan genocide.
They literally had the opportunity to create a generation in Gaza that wanted to live beside their Israeli neighbors. And from everything I've seen since the 7th of October in the region, and from all of the dead and the survivors and the family members I've seen, so many of them, particularly the people in the south who were attacked on the morning of the 7th, were literally people who dreamed of living in peace with their Palestinian neighbors.
Oh, the Palestinians hate, but Israelis want peace trope. Check out this footage of Israelis from before October 7th.
אני מדמיין שכל פעם אני רואה מולי ערבי מת, זה ממש שמח אותי כבר יותר.
I mean, Israeli settlers burned a Palestinian baby to death. and sellers can be seen at a wedding repeatedly stabbing a picture of that baby in celebration of murdering him. These genocidal sentiments are completely mainstream in Israeli discourse. They are expressed on every media network and by politicians across the entire political spectrum. But then there is the biggest lie of them all. Of the hundreds of lies told by the Israeli government, none is more widespread than this ridiculous claim that they do not target civilians on purpose, when the entire way they operate is a deliberate war against civilians. Let's debunk this lie once and for all. Consider the fact that Israeli military snipers specifically target Palestinian children. That's the assessment of dozens of international medics who have made it into Gaza. Just listen to what this one Jewish American doctor told CBS.
And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
One American doctor told us he even reviewed CT scans to confirm what he saw because he, quote, didn't believe that this many children could be admitted to a single hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. Of all the disaster zones you've seen, how does Gaza compare?
All of the disasters I've seen combined, 40 mission trips, 30 years, ground zero, earthquakes, all of that combined doesn't equal the level of carnage that I saw against civilians in just my first week in Gaza.
And when you say civilians, is it mostly children?
Almost exclusively children. I've never seen that before.
And you see video evidence of this. You see footage of Israeli snipers targeting Palestinian children who pose absolutely no threat, even in the West Bank. Look at these 2 kids who clearly pose no threat in Jenin. And look at this one Palestinian child standing around doing nothing, also getting shot, and listen to him scream after. Now watch CNN's coverage of a grandmother holding the hand of her young grandson and waving a white flag, being targeted by an Israeli sniper.
Now surrounded by Israeli forces. She holds the hand of her 5-year-old grandson Tayyim tightly, and then suddenly, little Tayyim quickly runs away as her son Mohammed rushes towards her. If you slow the video down, you can see Hala start to turn just before she is shot, as if she had caught sight of something. From the angle of her fall and the movement of the fleeing group, it is clear that the bullet came from the west or the south. CNN has geolocated the intersection. Mohammed told us when he reached his mother, he looked up and saw 2 Israeli tanks ahead of him to the south. And just 200 meters to the west, we know Israeli troops were stationed at the new Gaza Prep School for Boys, as captured here in satellite images and a photograph published on November 12th, the day Hala was killed.
You add on top of that Israel targets safe zones deliberately after they tell civilians to flee to them.
The aftermath of an airstrike in Rafah in southern Gaza, victims buried under the rubble. Rima Shabir is rushed to the hospital as her father attempts first aid. An NBC News investigation reveals that this is one of at least 7 deadly strikes in areas our Gaza team filmed after the IDF had explicitly designated them as safe in December. Our investigation reveals that the IDF targeted El Zahur, Al Shabura, and Tal El Sultan after it told residents to head there. On January 9th, an airstrike in Tal El Sultan. The attack hits the home of the Nofal family there, killing 15. On April 20th at 10 p.m., also in the Shabura district, a building leveled. Among those killed, a pregnant woman who NBC News reported on earlier this week. Her premature baby briefly survived, but died days later.
The fact that Israeli military and intelligence officials confessed to toppling entire residential buildings without warning on top of their residents. Using a program called Where is Daddy, where they specifically target militants at home with their families when they know they're there, instead of trying to kill them when they're out by themselves. Or there is the story of the 15 medics that they murdered and then buried their ambulance and tried to cover it up and lied about what had happened. Or the story of 6-year-old Hind Rajab, who was also murdered, and when the ambulance was specifically given approval by the Israeli government to get her, they ended up killing the medics inside that ambulance as well. Or just consider the fact that every major human rights organization in the world now accuses Israel of unspeakable crimes, including the crime of genocide and genocidal acts. I could go on giving evidence like this for another hour, but at some point, your feeling that Israel has a very moral army that never does anything wrong has to take a back step and make room in your brain for the avalanche of evidence demonstrating that Israel operates a terrorist genocidal army that is destroying a civilian population. You know, this was a debate where putting Murray's thoughtless, fact-free condescension on full display for 3 hours was a favor to anyone who mistook him for a serious or a respectable intellectual. But our discourse is so weird that there's always going to be either dumb or dishonest people who will tell you that he did a great job. For now, we will close by just giving props to Dave Smith for having had the patience to put up with it for 3 hours.